Hey everybody, so I'm going to show you one way to create a design that interlocks, right? So you're going to be working on a tessellation project for one of your final projects for this semester. So this is one way of many to kind of create that interlocking design, especially if you're trying to steer away from, geometric patterns or motifs that have been done over and over, right? But with anything, simple does not necessarily mean bad or lazy. It all depends on how you apply color, add texture, and so on and so forth, right? So here's going to be one way to kind of create that tessellated design. And so I have two little pieces of paper here I've cut out. It's a 3-inch square and a 2-inch square, right? So I'm probably most likely going to use the 3-inch square just because I want a little bit bigger of a design. But in all honesty, if you don't want to cut out a square of paper, like my sketchbook paper is graph paper, you can use a Post-it note. Those work really well. Index cards, anything like that. But what you're going to do with this tessellation design, right, it's all about kind of cutting into the piece of paper and reassigning that cutout to a different location. This is like the most surefire way to make sure that your design interlocks without like awkward gaps, right? So, perfection is great, but it can also be overrated. So as close as you can get to that kind of interlocking design, right? And for some of you, you might choose to do something that evolves, right? It plays more with scale, it distorts, and you're including some of that weirdness into the design, right? So there's a lot of ways to make it work, but I don't have like a clear vision. I'm just gonna start making a couple swirly twirlies. I like amoeba-esque shapes, so we're gonna see how far that gets me. So I have this little shape right now. It's really kind of quirky. Probably gonna run into problems with that later, but here we are. I'm gonna cut out my curve as close as I can. And this is something you don't necessarily have to draw it out first, right? I'm not really sticking to my lines very well. But you don't want to like kind of correct, right? I'm just gonna leave however I cut it out right now is how it's gonna stay. All right, so I just kind of drew a guideline just to give myself an idea, but you're welcome to just kind of go to this step. So what you're gonna do, I have this empty space now, and I'm gonna establish this somewhere else, right? So I like to use more of like the slide method, so I can slide it up, across, any of those directions, and you're gonna see that I'm gonna start to make that interlocking pattern, because when I set this up, this piece is going to interlock here, right? So this negative space is gonna be for the next tessellated design, and I have that up here, right? So I'm gonna just make sure that's where I want it. Yeah, I like it at the top, right? So I'm gonna do at least one other, kind of play around with this idea. Now I'm gonna be kind of lazy. I'm not gonna like tape the back or anything because this is essentially gonna be a stencil, right? I'm kind of creating a design stencil so I can trace around it and then plan out my design. So I'm gonna make another one. Let's kind of keep the curved linear motif. Keep this one a little more simple. Got my little shape here I'm gonna cut out. And if you don't necessarily, if you're working with something small and your scissors can't quite get into it, an X-Acto blade's gonna be a good option. Just remember to don't cut on any surface that you wanna stay the same. So I'm probably gonna translate mine over here because I kind of like this more open splat shape. It kind of looks like, a 90s good splat of slime. I'm gonna tape that on there. And if I don't necessarily love this, I can always flip it around and kind of use this later. But I think I'm gonna leave this as is right now, right? So I have my shape and my design. Tessellation. I love tessellation. So I know I have a few like kind of wonkier corners, but I'm just gonna kind of leave this as is. So I'm gonna try to trace this as quickly as possible just for the sake of the demo. Now I'm tracing with a pencil. Something like a 2H pencil is great. I think this is an F pencil. Now, of course, you don't have to, make as many loopies. It all depends on, your personal aesthetic. But this is the part, ignore what I'm kind of doing in the demo. You do want to take your time, right? Because you want to make sure that they interlock the way you want them to without any weirdness involved. I'm going a little fast. All right. So I'm gonna have one shape down, but you'll notice that as I move this, I should have my next shape kind of set, right? And that space right here is gonna leave that opening for it to connect, right? Because essentially all I've done is I've transformed a square or grid-based pattern and made it a little weirder, right? And so everything should kind of interlock the way it is supposed to. So this is one way to kind of make sure that you get a tessellated design, right? And so even though this shape is pretty abstract, right? It's kind of geometric meets abstraction. It all depends on how you develop the color, the texture, the value. Using those other elements and principles of design is going to be really impactful, right? Because I've had students really successfully, use this kind of post-it or piece of paper method, and one person ended up rendering like a princess in a castle kind of theme, right? So she transformed each like individual shape into a dragon, right? And so there's also nothing that can't say that like, maybe if I wanted a different shape, maybe I combine two of my tessellated pieces. So I'm going to carry this on for at least 2 more rows. I'm working a little quickly because I'm going to try to pop in at least an outline of color just to kind of reinforce the lines here so you guys can see a little easier. And the best thing about doing this kind of way to create a tessellation is if I absolutely hate the design, I didn't spend a whole lot of time making it, right? So this can be one of the harder things to kind of wrap your head around, just like out of the gate. For some people, it's really hard to like come up with a design that connects. So this is a good way to kind of get around that, right? And, orientation is something to consider too. If you don't love the orientation, you can translate your page. And like I said in the beginning, for those that want to distort, right? If I wanted to play with the scale of this object, maybe I make, a smaller one using my 2" by 2" piece of paper. And I find a way to kind of, fudge the gaps a little bit to kind of allow for that distortion, right? So it's just all about how you can get it to work in a kind of seamless way. Right, so I have my interlocking designs so far. It's gonna look much like a puzzle piece, but they're pretty cool. I love tessellations. I also like the work of M.C. Escher, right? He's really known for his tessellations and also really known for distorting them, right? So getting them to kind of interlock, but then also playing around with what that means, right? So if it helps you to create this design using this method and then, have like a sketch piece of paper, like a piece of copy paper, and then, draw it out and then like erase back into it, see if that's actually what you want or if you want to keep playing with the idea. Right, so get a little bit faster at knocking these in. And when you're doing this, once you have like your set design, hopefully you're not, whipping around your stencil and you're taking your time, right? Because craftsmanship is important as well, right? And you'll notice too that I can kind of fill in the gaps that I've left out here. All right. I'm going to do this side. In tangent with this assignment, I'm also going to show you how to create a very like at-home DIY, stamp for a kind of block printing technique, right? So look for that other video and tutorial for this process. So you can absolutely use whatever design materials you have in your, arsenal of tools. If you want to do it digitally, you want to hand draw it. I like to hand draw it just because it's fun. It kind of gets you to think about design in a little bit different of a way. But, you can print this too, and it's something I do in my own practice, right? So I'm going to kind of quickly work a few colors in here. Kind of feeling this pink. Also something to think about this, because you are playing around with pattern and probably color, is color interaction, right? Something we've talked about a lot this semester is like, how colors interact, how that can really affect your design. Maybe you're doing a gradient for your tessellation. So if the design part is, maybe this is boring, maybe pattern making isn't kind of your thing, how can you work with the interior of the shape to make it your own, right? How can you alter that and make that the like interesting dynamic part, right? So I'm not going to necessarily fill this in for the sake of video. I'm going to add some stripes though. All right, so I've got one. Let's do a couple different colors on either side. I'm going to go right for this green one here. I love these markers. It's okay if they mix a little bit. Kind of get that muted color in between. Again, when you're doing this, hopefully you're having a little bit more precision than me just kind of going for the gold here, going as fast as I can for demo's sake. Try not to make too many like 20-minute videos for you guys to watch. This one I'm going to kind of leave as is. Let's see. Do like this gold too. Maybe this is the one I will fill in for fun. Nope, didn't quite finish my design on that one. That's okay. Again, you know, it's great if the precision aspect of this kind of project or activity is the thing that you want to focus on, go for it. See how sharp you can make your tessellation. Really think about textile patterns, right? So if you are interested in pattern making, this is a great opportunity to not only play with color theory, but just getting, you know, the same kind of design to read differently. You know, I do a lot of bleed patterns in my own work. And so this is something that definitely interests me for my practice, but if that bores you, find another way to be creative using this kind of pattern. And there's nothing that says you can't combine a few, right? So if I liked the way this looked, maybe I'm repeating the kind of more gold muted tone other places. Maybe I'm combining different ones, that kind of thing. All right. Getting somewhere, right? But it is kind of interesting too, like how much this gold shape pops forward in comparison to like this striped motif. Let's go for the purple over here. Should have left that part open. That's okay. So one way to kind of really get that interlocking design, right? See that kind of cut and paste or tape motif. And there's different ways to do this. I know people that have like mirrored the shapes, rotated them. You can really think about, you know, maybe you want it to interlock in several different ways. That is totally up to you. A little bit closer stripes here for this one. Maybe I'll go for plaid. Maybe I'll do a different color for the plaid. Let's do some black. All right. I'm going to do one more color, maybe two. Really want this to pop out. Yes. Let's get that little bit here. Love the way that orange looks against that magenta. Cool. You know, not the most interesting color combinations, but hopefully you guys are getting the idea, right? And how much, you know, even though all of my things are really simple, I'm just kind of filling in parts of the tessellated design, there's a lot of options, right? I'm noticing now he kind of looks more and more like a camel every time I look at him, but, you know, flipping it like this, oh, not that way because you can't see the top, flipping it like this, you know, kind of gives it a different kind of life, right? So hopefully this was helpful in how to assess creating an interlocking design without, you know, busting your brain with figuring out, okay, how is this piece going to connect? How does this shape connect, right? And you can have a lot of fun with these kind of abstract shapes and figuring out ways to turn them into more meaningful objects or playing around with that color interaction of the design, right? So look for the printmaking, block printing tutorial next, and good luck.